The war in Ukraine takes a new turn, a darker turn, as Russian submarines have now gotten involved to disintegrate Ukraine with a barrage of missiles. This comes as a shock to many, as Ukraine has no formidable submarine threats or defenses. This potential overkill could be what pushes NATO to join the conflict more directly. And should that happen, a number of highly lethal NATO submarines could possibly be called upon to deal unprecedented damage to Russia. These powerful NATO submarines are our focus in this video. But first, we must look at how and why, after 4 months into the conflict, submarines are now getting involved at all. Recently, the only Russian Kilo-class submarine equipped with pump jet propulsion, the Alrosa, returned to sea after months of upgrades for operational trials in a likely preparation to join combat operations against Ukraine. This is the first time in 8 years that the submarine is being tested in various operation modes to prove its abilities. This is big news, especially as Russia remains the biggest fan of submarines and believes in the sheer lethality of these underwater machines. In fact, several documents within the last decade show that Russia's shift toward high-tech weaponry revolves heavily around submarine upgrades, as submarines play the most critical role in their navy. As said earlier, one upgraded submarine is the Alrosa, which now features advanced weapons that didn't exist during its earlier years, weapons that could be a source of worry for NATO. And the Alrosa is far from being the only Russian submarine NATO has to worry about. There's an entire fleet of them. Russia has about 20 Kilo-class submarines, siblings to the Alrosa, getting ready for war. This 230-foot-long class of submarines was introduced in 1980, and they've had a stellar career since then. Stellar enough to have Russia keep them in service for over 4 decades, and upgrade them every decade of the way to keep up with the times. The most significant of these upgrades perhaps being the adoption of the 3M14 caliber long-range strike missiles. These missiles can wipe out targets from over 30 miles away in seconds, thanks to a basically hyperonic top speed of Mach 3. That's faster than any fighter jet in operation today. A missile like this strongly complements the useful but aging capabilities of the 40-plus-year-old submarines, particularly the 6- or 7-bladed propeller propulsion that can power them for more than 8,600 miles and give them a top speed of up to 17 knots. But as said earlier, the case is different with the Alrosa, currently being tested, which uniquely has a pump jet propulsion system like the Boré-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines. A pump jet propulsion system offers an array of advantages over propellers, including a general increased efficiency across most of the submarine's performance envelope, particular advantages in shallow water, and the ability to reach higher speeds without noisy cavitation, meaning they can travel long distances around much more stealthily, which is definitely the most important advantage, as when sitting in the middle of the ocean with no real way to escape, being a relatively easy target once spotted, the last thing any submariner needs is a noisemaker, which is probably why the Alrosa, and not one of its siblings, is being reactivated for a possible journey to Ukraine. The reason for this reactivation, well in advance of the current war in Ukraine though, remains unclear. It does seem like the decision may very well have been driven by the demands of the conflict, as Ukraine continues to be more of a force to reckon with than anyone could have predicted. It was definitely far less predictable than NATO getting involved in a full-out European war such as this. And so, with a NATO intervention a possible sight, let's see the submarine fleet at its disposal. At this point, Russia seems to be tied into 2 world power tussles. 1, Russia against the United States, and 2, Russia against NATO. And because there's so much to be said and several differences between both tussles, we'll look at how the Russian subs fare against the American ones in a separate release. But here, we'll focus more on the non-American NATO submarines, starting with the UK Astute class. The Astute class is the United Kingdom's latest class of nuclear-powered submarines. In this class will be 7 subs in total, with 2 yet to be completed. The first was declared fully operational in 2014, introducing a new wave of 300-foot-long British submarines that could ride at a top speed of 30 knots for 1 or 2 or 3 or forever years with a literal unlimited range, thanks to a propulsion system of Rolls-Royce PWR-2 nuclear reactor and multiple MTU 600 kilowatt diesel generators. The submarine is kept abreast of its miles-wide surroundings with a team of the Thales Sonar 2076, Atlas DESO-25 Echo Sounder, 2 Thales CM010 optronic masts, and the Raytheon successor IFF for identifying friend from foe. And should a major foe be spotted, the sub can handle the situation with its Tomahawk Block 4 cruise missiles. These American long-range, all-weather subsonic anti-ship submarine-launched surface-to-surface cruise missiles, each costing a scary $1.9 million, can carry either a conventional or a nuclear warhead and attack targets from over 1,000 miles away. Another weapon at the disposal of the sub is the Spearfish heavyweight torpedoes, wire-guided 4,000-pound British torpedoes with autonomous active terminal homing sonar and aluminized PBX explosive that can take out targets from over 33 miles away. But perhaps the most powerful weapon in this sub is its highly efficient complement of up to 109 crew members that keep the submarine running all forever long, with the occasional docking to restock on food and supplies and to remember what land looks like, in case they'd forgotten. Being at sea for so long can do that to a person, I think. Overall, each Astute-class submarine is a $2 billion lethal machine that Russia should be worried about. The SUFFREN class is a brand new submarine class. In fact, the first one was only just declared fully operational on June 3, 2022, roughly 3 months after the beginning of Russia's invasion. Unlike previous French submarines, the SUFFREN is not equipped with a periscope, but rather an optronic mast like what's found on the British Astute-class subs, allowing for much longer range and outside visible spectrum detection of targets. The SUFFREN class is also the first French submarine to have the ability to deploy a small underwater vehicle for special forces use, thanks to an attachable dry deck shelter. The huge 326-foot-long sub is optimized for a small complement of 60 thanks to extensive automation. And despite reportedly having an endurance of only 70 days due to the limitation of food for its complement, the SUFFREN sub actually has an unlimited range, as it is powered by the 200,000 horsepower K-15 nuclear reactor, 2 13,000 horsepower turbo generator groups, an electrically driven pump jet, and 2 640 horsepower emergency diesel generators in case of, well, an emergency. The sub has an offensive capability of 4 533mm launch tubes and 20 storage racks that hold the FG-29 mines, the 31-mile range Exocet SM-39 anti-ship missiles, the 31-mile range F-21 Artemis heavy torpedoes, and the 350-mile range MDCN Storm Shadow cruise missiles that all combine to deliver highly destructive fire from water. Yes, Sweden isn't a part of NATO, or at least not yet, as they recently made a request to join, a request inspired by the worry that if Russia could invade one neighboring country, they could invade another, unless that another was a NATO country. Russian President Vladimir Putin commented on this, saying they were under no threat before, but a NATO membership could change that. However, the membership process is still ongoing, and should it be successful, Sweden does have submarines that could serve as a force multiplier for NATO, the Gotland-class submarines. The Gotland-class subs are 200-foot-long diesel-electric submarines, the world's first diesel-electric submarines, in fact, to feature a capability previously only seen available with nuclear-powered submarines in the form of a Stirling engine air-independent propulsion system, which extends underwater endurance from a few days to a week. The Stirling engine on the Gotland-class subs, built by the ship's builders, Kockums, drives a 75-kilowatt generator for either propulsion or charging the batteries, and is particularly well suited for the submarine as it can use the surrounding seawater as a heat sink to increase efficiency and aid in stealth by being nearly completely silent even when going at a top speed of up to 20 knots. And for even more stealth, all shipboard machinery is isolated and mounted on rubber dampeners to reduce vibrations and noises. The sub has a hydrodynamic hull design that reduces noise, infrared signature, and active sonar response. Its magnetic signature is counteracted by 27 independent electromagnets, short-circuiting extremely low-frequency electrical fields. The sub also has various hull coatings that reduce active sonar response, while the mast is coated with radar-absorbent material. All of these combining to make the submarine virtually invisible to radar and protect its relatively low complement of 32 officers and seamen. So, Swedish, French, and British. 3 NATO submarines against 1 Russian submarine, if Russia goes on an overkill spree. This kind of umbrella protection is what Ukraine was aiming for with their attempt to join NATO. However, whether or not the papers have been signed, Ukraine is in many ways already being treated like a NATO member, and that's a beauty to see. Another beauty to see would be you subscribing to this channel and giving this video a like, so kindly do so now. That would be all for now. Thanks for watching.